Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second Camp NaNoWriMo July 2021 write-in. We're super excited to have you here. We were creeping on the chat a little bit before we went live, so we saw like people introducing themselves. Feel free to keep introducing yourself. I see people dropping in where they're writing from. Someone from Uganda, England, Australia, Florida, North Carolina, Colorado, New Jersey, really like all over. So feel free to drop in where you're writing from. I see people sharing what they're writing for camp, action, fantasy, mystery. So you can do that as well. And we'll introduce ourselves while you're doing that. So my name is Mariah. I'm one of the program directors at National Novel Writing Month, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm here with a couple really cool people. I'll introduce or let Nautica introduce themselves first.
I'm Nautica. I'm an editorial intern for the summer, and I go by she, her, or they, them.
And then Lindsay, I'm gonna go next.
Hey everyone, many of you may not know who I am. I'm a former program director and I'm helping with Camp NaNoWriMo both as a camp counselor and then also leading the memoir track that some of you are participating in. I go by she, her pronouns and I'm writing from Atlanta, Georgia.
Lindsay, I bet that there are people in the chat who have been because sometimes people will say like, oh, I've been writing NaNoWriMo since like 2011, or they've been around much longer than me. But you were like NaNoWriMo OG. Lindsay was the second hire, right? So it was Chris Beatty, who didn't hire anyone. He hired himself. He made himself. And then Tavia, and then
Tavia.
you.
Yep, Tavia and me. Yep, three musketeers for a while.
Oh, we should have a write-in where you just like we can just ask you a bunch of questions about how I imagine it was like really wild when it was just yeah.
Funny stories, old school stories.
Yeah. Um, and if anybody in the chat is like, I've been around since it started, please say hello because I'm sure Lindsay would love to hear from you. So we have more people. Jason Andrews, greetings from South Africa. Um, Linda is writing Memoir from Kentucky. So we've got a lot of people, which is really cool. Serenity Rose Art is writing comic strip scripts. So this I'm sure many of you know because that's probably how you found us, but Camp NaNoWriMo is going on right now. So unlike NaNoWriMo in November, during camp you can write whatever you feel like writing, and you can set your own goal. So that's why we're getting people writing all different kinds of things, including Lindsay mentioned that she is leading a special memoir track. And if you haven't checked that out yet, I'm going to drop the link in the chat. Oops, that's the wrong link. Don't go there. I'm going to drop the Camp Memoir link in the chat because she shared a bunch of really cool resources about how to write a memoir. And you could start doing that now if you wanted to switch your project, or you could always use those resources later and to write your memoir. She also has a really great book that just came out called Ready, Set, Memoir. And you were an author on the original Ready, Set novel, right?
That's right, yep.
She wrote the book on noveling. Do you say that to people? That's what I was
Well, they said for Ready Set Memoir, they said that we're going to call this the essential guide. And I was like, whew, that makes me nervous. Sounds real official.
Boom. So if you are interested in that book, you can check that out as well. It's linked on that Camp Memoir website that I just dropped in the chat. Okay, let me see. Sorry, too many things to think about. Oh, speaking of camp, if you haven't started your camp project yet, definitely do that on the NaNoWriMo website. It's super easy to start. I think there's a link below this video. Also reminding you that we're going to be doing these virtual write-ins every Wednesday, this time during July, except maybe next week when we have something special. We can tell you more about that later, so definitely click the subscribe link and click on the bell if you want to get notifications for new videos and live events. And we won't spam you or anything like that. You just get like fun updates when we're doing fun stuff. Okay. So throughout this virtual write-in, if you've never been to a virtual write-in, it's part discussion, like part we'll talk about different writing things, tips, our experiences you can share in the chat, and part actually writing. So we'll provide some prompts and we'll do some sprints. So we'll probably write together for 5 minutes and then a 10-minute session and then maybe another 10-minute session. And the prompts are designed to help you write your project. If they work for you in this moment, use them. If they don't work for you in this moment, you don't need to use them. It's not homework. But you should use the time, since we're all together, to focus on your whatever creative project you're working on. And since we have Lindsey here, we're also going to take the time a little bit later to ask her some questions about writing memoir. So if you have any questions related to that, save them up, drop them in the chat. And Nautica designed, this is Nautica's first virtual write-in script, and they did a really amazing job. So for sure, everyone will want to use all these prompts. And they designed it so you can use it for fiction, like if you're working on your fiction project, or if you'd like to use them more for memoir, you can relate them to yourselves instead. All right, I'm going to pass it off to Nautica for our first sprint. So this one will be, I think, 5 minutes. Do you want to explain the prompt?
Yeah, the prompt is just using these words or find a theme with these words. And it's going to be sweat, bend, practice, and challenger. So we're coming already kind of combative. So we're going to have 5 minutes and just whatever you come up with, this is what we're going to write about.
And we're going to say this prompt ends at 42. Well, probably it'll be 43 by the time I'm done talking, which means wherever you are at the 40, we'll say 43 is probably when we'll end. And I
Do you want
dropped
me to
them
start?
Yeah, would you do that? That's amazing. Thank you. And then I dropped the prompt in the chat, and I'll drop the time in the chat as well. And do I have another and, or am I just like vamping? Nope. We're gonna write. Open your project. Let's go. Ready, set, go. Sweat, bend, practice, challenger. think we're about halfway through.
Timer's going off. If you have a sentence left, finish it up. And let us know your word count or what y'all put down in the chat.
And as they're doing that, how'd it go for you guys? I did this one. Sometimes I just ignore the prompt and I just do my own thing. But this time I was thinking of memoir. Because I have this other project I'm working on, but I'm also interested in memoir. And so I kind of just used the words as jumping off points to try to think about like different times in my life. And I ended up remembering all this stuff about softball practice when I was in middle school and how much I hated it. And I would like pray for rain every time like I saw the sign to the, I was like, please let it rain. So I did a little bit in that way. What about you guys?
So I actually found it challenging to use the prompt because it made me actually really reflect on the thing that's what was making me sweat. It wasn't necessarily like writing about this isn't going to make sense. I wasn't writing a story or any event in my life that was making me sweat, but the fact that approaching this subject matter is what's really like contorting me and making me sort of bend into ways of thinking that I'm not really comfortable about, or subject matters that I don't really want to confront. So it was like kind of meta, because that's a part of it that was like the challenger of the prompt.
Cool.
When I was coming up with this prompt, I didn't realize how closely it kind of tied with memoir, like coming up with like challengers in everyday life. I was like thinking of as an excuse, like maybe like when folks are writing in their chapters, maybe there's like a tense moment they want to get to and push through. At least that's what I wrote about on when they finally like meet a villain. How do I want to like plan it out?
That's cool. I love thinking about it because like we sometimes have in our heads like the big challenging moment like that the story revolves around, but I think also when you're writing a novel, like each chapter has to have that moment as well. You know, like each chapter has to turn on something. So like what's that moment in each chapter that's the challenger moment, or what it turns on. So it's cool. People are sharing like uh a lot of words, like 104, 233, 72, 94, 57 with this emoji. But like, yeah. A couple of people are sharing sentences. Like, I just saw one. But wait, I'm scrolling back. There's just a lot of, well, it's hard to keep up with the chat. I lost it. Sorry. Oh, here it is. The
Shadows.
lair. That was it. On the palace floor lay Serbian, the once proud king, drenched in his own blood. Kira's own sands rose his sword and turned to Aldra. Sweat dripped from her brow as she gulped. Pretty dramatic. That felt like a real challenging moment.
Cool. Yeah.
Um, and then Amy Ayers says they basically describe someone having a panic attack and fighting with themselves, which also sounds very dramatic. I love hearing it. Um, hold on. Um, did you want to ask your question too, Nautica?
Yeah. Kind of like for the discussion piece, like really thinking like how do you write your characters? Like do you base it off of people you know or create a list and imagine what kind of character you write about? I kind of just, I think I base it off of the relationships I have with people and then loosely like find a way to like morph it into a new character. At least that's how I do it.
And also feel free to drop in the chat like your how do you approach characters? Um, I don't know. I think that I should do that because I think that I would end up with more realistic characters. I don't know, man. I'm like in the third draft of this novel, and I feel like just now my characters are starting to feel like not just like horrible stereotypes of like or like one-dimensional people. And sometimes I think that if I had a real life person in mind when I was writing each of them, they would from the beginning be like a little more imbued with like a liveliness or something.
Mhm.
I don't know. How do you, I have a question to skew that towards memoir, which is like, how do you write characters when the characters are real people?
This is exactly what I was just thinking of. And it's the same problem that you talk about with making sure that they're not one dimensional. And I think it's really important in writing people to, of course, you have to stay true to their true natures, but to represent both sides of them, the complicated side and the really likable side, so that everyone is a little bit ambiguous, so that everyone clearly has faults, but that in the end, you also can see where they're coming from, so that you want to stick with them throughout the length of the essay or the book. And I think one way to really get to that sort of duality in everyone's nature is to see what motivates them. What are they willing to really fight for or to like get down and dirty for, and to not be so likable for, to be able to represent that on the page in the story and show that sort of driving force for each different character.
Ashwise in the chat said that they like using real life flaws from people they've known and giving them to my characters. Otherwise, they seem too one-dimensional. I
That's
like
such
to
a good trick. Yeah.
flaws are so good or also like I feel like the times when I've really done a good job about keeping like a writer's notebook and I'll write down like little quirks that you see people doing like on the BART in Oakland or like at a cafe because I feel like I know all the quirks that I have. I'm like I chew on my cuticles and I like like I know all of mine, but then there's only so many times you can make a character like biting their cuticles before you're like okay, people have other things that they do. So I think keeping notes on those little things that people do that you notice. Um,
Or distinctive ways of talking too. That's a really great way of making characters memorable, is to imbue them with like funny word choices. There are some people who just have favorite words that they say over and over again, or funny ways of speaking.
some people are sharing, like Jocelyn and a couple other people said that they use the Myers-Briggs personality types as jumping off points for characters.
Cool.
Or,
Such a good idea.
yeah, that I thought that one was interesting. Someone else shared, oh, that they are like, I can't find the exact person who said it, but basing it off of Sims characters, which I think is like pretty legit. Oh, it is. Jasmine says, I'm gonna admit it. I've stolen some of my characters from my Sims games before. If any of you play D&D, like I've have like a couple D&D characters that I'm like, oh, I definitely want to put these people in novels because you spend so much time getting to know them. Um, which is kind of nerdy, but it's fun. Um, cool. Maybe we should move on to our next prompt.
Yeah. If folks are ready to go for the next sprint, prompt 2 is write a scene about your character in preparing for a major challenge that they're about to face. Describe their new surroundings. Where are they? Why are they there? Do they want to be there? Are there other people in this place? So I know that's kind of big, but just like focus on like the major challenge and the aspects you want to bring out. And this prompt is going to be 10 minutes, so it's going to be longer.
So sprint 2 ends at 10 minutes is 01, I guess. At
Okay.
01.
Start now?
Yeah, let's start now. I'm gonna get ready for my challenge.
Okay, go.
Oh, you have about 2 minutes left.
Thirty more seconds. Going off. Okay, that was time. If y'all have one sentence left, finish it up now. How was that for y'all?
Good. It was double the time, but I wrote like 5 times as much.
Cool.
Yeah, it was great. How about for you guys?
I was using it kind of to plan because I was thinking I'm in, like I said, I'm in this third draft and I have the rest of the scenes planned out. I'm like halfway through the novel, and I was kind of thinking about it from like a what's the challenger in each, like what's that challenge in each moment in each scene, and kind of going through and making sure that I had that really like established.
Nice. I also use this time to plan. I know I came up with the plot, the prompts, and I was like, oh, this is hard. So let me plan around the challenge and how do I want the conflict to occur? But
Sometimes,
it's, oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
You go.
I don't remember what I was gonna say.
Oh no, sorry. I was gonna say sometimes I do that with the third prompt. Like I'll really get started in this middle one, and then for our third prompt, I'll like actually start writing and like get into it. Because sometimes I feel like I need to do a little more planning first, like we said. And feel free to drop in the chat, like if you have a sentence that you want to share, or if you want to share your word count. We're seeing a lot of word counts, and or if you wanted to keep sharing any advice for writing characters. A couple of people shared things right before we started the sprint, including using tarot cards to help develop characters, or also using like zodiac research, so you can like look up.
That's fun.
Yeah, I
That,
really should know what sign each of my characters is.
that's such a great backstory exercise. Even, I mean, for memoir too, because you are charged with writing people from real life, I think it would be a really interesting way of getting to know these people you're writing about, to see if any of like tarot, or not really tarot, I guess. I mean, I guess you could read their cards, but particularly zodiac, to see if some of those traits trigger your thinking or your memory and building that character.
That reminds me of like an exercise I did with a professor, and they like just think of the little things about your character, like besides zodiac, like what does their room look like? Is it a mess? Like it says a lot about who they are with like, oh, they listen to this music, like stuff like that.
Yeah,
Or if they have collections of some kind, or
yeah. Um, and okay, so now we're getting some sentences in the chat, which are really cool. Like, Jocelyn Hill says, a pop song I've never heard before echoes through the vacant hallways of a shopping mall, matching the rhythm of the flickering fluorescents. Very cool sentence. Thank you. Thank you
wow.
for adding that to our lives today. I needed it. Jules says, beyond the study room window, snow soft as feathers falls onto the damp parking lot pavement and melts upon contact. Another one, appreciate that. And a couple of people, sharing appreciation for your prompts, Nautica. Like Beth Gibbons says, the challenges are fun to plug into my storyline, forcing me to flesh out ideas. So that's great. We also wanted to take this time, since we have Lindsey here, before we start our very last prompt, if we could ask you some memoir questions. So if you're in the chat and you have some questions about writing memoir, and a memoir are like stories from your own life, feel free to drop them in. Otherwise, Nautic and I were hoping that you could tell us, like, if you had to say, like, your top 3 memoir tips, what would they
Sure.
be?
Ooh, top 3 memoir tips. So,
And imagine you're me and I've never written a memoir before.
I've never written one.
I think my first tip would be, so I'm gonna try and go like broad to specific. My first tip would be stay specific, because a memoir isn't just autobiography. You're not writing the story of your whole life. You're writing about yourself and a specific subject, and that subject could be a time in your life or something that happened to you, something you love, a relationship, an event, something that fundamentally changed you. And so it's really important when you are planning your story, when you are planning your memoir, and crafting the scope of it, that everything you include somehow comes to bear on the specific subject that you're writing about within your own life. My second tip would be tell the truth. Truth is really hard, but you have to tell your truth the way that it happened for you. Don't write things you think people want to hear, because they'll know, they'll be able to sniff out the disingenuous nature of you sort of sugarcoating what happened, or being evasive. And third one, my third tip be, give yourself permission to write it all, even if it makes you uncomfortable, even if you're not sure you're going to include it. I know I just said stay specific, and that really is a post-editing guideline. It's going to take a while for you to feel comfortable writing about yourself so honestly and intimately. So include it all, and allow yourself time to really get comfortable with what you include when you are making sure it cleaves to your theme or subject matter.
Good tips. And you kind of answered this, but someone asked, let me scroll up. Nicole says, how do you handle talking about people who were monsters in your life?
Oh my gosh. It's such a beautiful way of phrasing it, and such a hard thing, because you are writing about people out in the world that other people know. And as I said before, when you're building characters in fiction, and how I do it in memoir, I think that as hard as it is to find what makes these monsters tick, it's also necessary to somehow find a way of making them relatable to your reader, and not completely, as Mariah had said, keeping them like this one-dimensional demon. That there has to be something, however small, that redeems them, so that people want to stick with your story about the relationship that you had to this person, instead of just writing them off and saying, okay, well, they're evil, And I think if that ends up being the case, you can fall out of the story really easily.
I'm thinking of like well, I was thinking of a lot of things when you said that, but I was thinking of that about the educated memoir, right, by Claire
Yes,
Westover and her parents. And I mean, she has some like pretty challenging. Her parents are pretty challenging, or Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. Like her parents are also kind of not
that's what I
almost
was thinking too.
monsters,
Yeah.
right? Like if in some way, like they are monsters, but then also when you read it, they're just like it's complicated. Like you feel complicated about them the same way that I'm sure she did. So
I think that's exactly it. I think by making sure that you're humanizing them, it's almost more heartbreaking because you want them to be better.
yeah. Jocelyn Hill says, "How do you give feedback on a memoir without invalidating someone's experiences?"
Ooh, hopefully the feedback won't invalidate it. That you can give feedback about the way that I always did it, or I had it done for me in graduate school, for example, is focusing on the questions you have as a reader and whether they're the good kind of question, the kind of question that makes you want to keep reading and finding out more, or the bad kind of question where you're kind of lost and confused. Because books need questions, but they need to be the good kind of question that is like the story engine and the empathy engine and the wanting to learn more, and not the I don't understand motivation, or I'm very lost in time and space. How does this time frame relate to this one? I don't get the transitions, and that you're not actually attacking in a way that, as you said in your question, would sort of discount the actual experiences or emotions. Because in writing memoir, as I said before, really it is your truth, and that's your yeah that's your story to tell. And so when you're getting feedback, having someone say like, I don't like that, that's the way it happened.
Maybe just our last memoir question, probably leaving said, raise his hand. Memoir question. How difficult is it to go back into painful memories, memories that make your gut turn just thinking about?
Super difficult. I was really debating my third tip, because if I can have a fourth tip, it would be kind to yourself and be gentle with yourself and give yourself the space and time to do this thing, because you likely will be reliving some painful memories, places you don't necessarily want to return to. And it does take a lot of self-kindness and self-care to get to those places and tell a story that you feel needs urgently to be told. That's why you're writing the memoir in the first place, but doing it in such a way that you emerge from the storytelling process whole.
Yeah, it makes sense because I remember you talking at the Zoom, maybe something, I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but like finding kind of like hot spots in your life to know like what, in our whole life, what are we going to write about that will make a good memoir, and like looking for the hot spot or something like that. And thinking like, oh, some hot spots are just hot because like they're bad, you know? But
Yeah,
like it might not be such a good memoir if you just write like here are the days when everything went right and nothing went wrong and everything was good.
so true. Yeah, again, with the one dimensionality, it is important to balance sort of the dark and the light. And
Thank you for sharing those things. Should we go to our last writing prompt?
Yeah,
sure.
cool. So the final prompt is related to the earlier ones, but now write the aftermath of the challenge. Has your character won, lost, or have they found some other way around the difficulty that they were facing? How does the outcome of this challenge affects their lives or the lives around them? So, we had the battle. What now? And so this one we're gonna write for 10 minutes. Okay, ready?
Yeah. Whoa, I'm not ready. Let me drop the question chat. Sorry.
It's okay.
I was like off the ball for a second. Okay. prompt 3, and it'll end at 24. Okay, now I'm ready.
Okay, y'all go.
We've got 2 minutes left.
Okay, that is time. Finish up your sentences. Cool, how was that? Or should we go on to the next part?
We can do whatever. We've got 6 minutes left. People could share like their total word count if they wanted, like how many words you wrote this whole session, or a sentence from this for sure. If you wrote
These
something
were such awesome prompts. I love them, Nautica. Thank you.
Came from a personal place of what I needed to do.
That's cool. I think that's a great way to come up with super effective prompts.
Thanks.
Same. They're really good. We've worked with a lot of editorial interns, and I was like, when I saw your script, I was like, oh, great, they've got it. Like, and I think that I think other people appreciated them as well.
Yeah, looks like it. People wrote a lot. That's great.
Yeah, we've got Jocelyn Hills wrote 529 for the session. Emma wrote 314 words. Linda says, I should start at the end. 241 words for the last prompt. Great prompts. Elizabeth Simmons wrote 318. Zola Bean wrote 340 again and 680 the session. They missed the first one. And probably leaving shared a sentence. She was doomed. Her mother was fuming. Her father was disappointed. But at least the shadow was safe. For that, Nora could put up with the grounding of the century. I want to know more. And Missy May said 338, terrible grammar and wording, but that's for editing. And I love that for sure. Like, there's no way you could write a lot of words at a virtual write-in and all of those words are great. Like, that's just impossible. I don't know. You either have to write like 3 perfect words or you have to just write a bunch of words that are, sometimes wonky, and then like you said, you fix them in revision. Very cool. Let's see, should we review any of like the big review things we have? For instance, right now we're running a summer fundraising campaign, and I'll share the link in the I just lost it. I'll share the link in the chat. If you have the money right now and you're thinking, I would love to donate to NaNoWriMo, we would love for you to donate. If you don't have the money to do that, that's totally fine. Like, you're contributing to our community by coming to these virtual write-ins and sharing your stories and sharing your energy. So we appreciate that just as much. We've got a really cool like prize that we're offering this fundraising because we got a bunch of these Heroes journals donated from Heroes Journal. You should check them out. I'd never heard of them before, but they make these really cool goal tracking journals. Um, and they are flying off of our shelves. So we are going to run out of them before this campaign is over. So if you're interested in getting one, I would donate soon because people are getting them really fast and we have a limited supply. And so there's that. Drop that in the chat. Let's see, what else should we remind them? Nautic, you made a list, maybe.
Let's see. What about next? Oh, yeah, Writers of Color Zoom Hangout on Saturday. It's a really good space, especially if you're trying to connect with other folks of color across the world and really like learn more about like writing or like authors.
And that one you can find it if you go to our official calendar, or actually I'll just drop the link to register straight into the chat, and that is just for writers of color. So thank you for respecting that space. Oh, another thing, thank you for putting this in the notes, but next week we're not going to have our normal virtual write-in. We're doing, as part of this fundraising campaign, we're going to have another special guest, Marie Lu, who is an author, is going to do a webcast with us where we can ask her questions and maybe do some writing together. And that's going to happen at 3 o'clock Pacific time on that Wednesday. So we're not going to do a 1:30 Pacific time virtual write-in and a 3 o'clock webcast. So I encourage you to come to that, though. We did this last year with her. She's really cool. Come with all of your questions. I think she writes dystopian fiction, which is pretty cool. Any final words of encouragement or advice about memoir or life or just like anything?
I loved writing with you guys. I'm so excited just to think about everybody's word count times 3 prompts times all the hours that we have left in this month to keep working on these stories. You guys are inspiring. You people, all of you people out there are inspiring.
And thank you so much for being our guest, Lindsey. I know we were just kind of like, come do this with us, and didn't give you a lot of prep time or explanations. So
I got so much written too. It was super. Thanks.
All right. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for coming.
Bye, everyone.